You meet yourself in silence, not in the noise of the world. John O'Donohue. Before we begin, here's a small ritual. Write in the comments one word that accurately describes your current state. Sign it and let's get started. There is a silence that lives beneath every loud moment. A pause between the beats of life. It's not the silence of peace. It's the silence of absence, an emptiness we've grown used to. We wear it like clothes. We speak from it. We build relationships, careers, lives upon it. And yet, something always feels missing. We learn early to play roles, to smile when we feel like screaming, to nod when we disagree, to chase what others call success, even when it makes us hollow. We become echoes of what the world expects, not because we want to, but because we forgot how not to. This forgetting becomes survival, and slowly, it becomes identity. But identity built on forgetting is fragile. It cracks at the first sign of realness, a death, a betrayal, a failure. These moments are not tragedies. They are revelations. They peel off the masks. They expose the silence we've buried under noise. And suddenly we are face to face with something terrifying, ourselves. There comes a moment when the mirror no longer lies, when what stares back at us is not the version we curated, but the truth we've denied, the tiredness in our eyes, the tightness in our chest, the feeling of drifting. All of it has been there, waiting for us to stop pretending, waiting for us to look. It's in this moment that the illusion begins to crumble. The life we built on borrowed dreams begins to collapse. The relationships we held onto out of fear begin to rot. The goals that once excited us now feel dead. Not because something is wrong, but because something is awakening. And this awakening doesn't arrive with light. It arrives with destruction, with confusion, with loss. We start to question everything, not out loud, but deep inside. Why do I live this way? Why do I feel so numb? Why am I afraid of being alone with myself? But there are no questions, only answers we have been avoiding. The truth is, we don't know who we are. Not really. We know how to function, how to adapt, how to perform. But when the performance ends, when the applause fades, who is left? That is where the journey begins. Not with a goal, not with a plan, but with a fracture, a break in the image, a crack in the mask, a whisper from something deeper, something raw, something real. And once it speaks, you can't unhear it. That whisper becomes a roar. It shakes the foundations. It pulls apart the illusions. It drags you from comfort into confrontation. You realize you've been living someone else's life, wearing someone else's skin, playing someone else's part. You realize you have never truly met yourself. And from that realization, everything changes. The shadow is not a monster. It's not evil. It's not darkness outside of you. It is the darkness within you that you refuse to see. The parts you hide, deny, and exile. The rage behind your politeness. The envy behind your smile. The fear behind your ambition. It is not your enemy. It is you. Every time you suppress a scream, every time you silence your tears, every time you pretend, the shadow grows. It doesn't disappear. It waits. It watches. And it collects everything you reject. Every thought that makes you uncomfortable. Every desire that feels dangerous. Every truth that contradicts the image you built. The shadow holds it all. It shows up in moments when you lose control. When you say things you didn't mean. When you act out of character. When you sabotage your own success. It slips through the cracks of your composure. It whispers in your loneliness. It erupts in your anger. And still, you tell yourself, that wasn't me. But it was. It always was. The shadow is not a stranger. It is the part of you that remembers the pain you ignored, the humiliation, the abandonment, the rejection. It is the wound that was never allowed to speak. And so it speaks in its own language. Through addiction, aggression, depression, through projection and manipulation, through your compulsions and fears. You may believe you're in control, that your life is ordered, disciplined, safe. But if you haven't met your shadow, you're not in control. You're avoiding. You're surviving on the surface, while the depth remains unexplored. The shadow doesn't need your permission. It doesn't follow rules. It doesn't care about your image. It cares about truth. And the truth is, no transformation is possible without facing the shadow. No healing, no freedom, no awakening. The light you seek can't be found without first walking through your own darkness. It starts when you stop blaming others, when you stop pointing at the world, when you realize that the enemy is not out there, it's within. The anger you feel toward others is a reflection. The control you crave over life is a mask for your own helplessness. The perfection you chase is a shield against shame. Everything you run from, everything you judge in others, everything you mock, is a mirror. That realization breaks you, because now you can't escape. Now you see your shadow everywhere, in your relationships, in your dreams, in your patterns. You see how you manipulate with kindness, how you hide behind logic, how you weaponize your wounds, and it disgusts you, because you thought you were better than this. You were never better, you were just unaware. But awareness is not guilt, it's not shame, it's a door to wholeness, to integration, to becoming real. Because only when you hold your shadow in your hands, without judgment, without fear, do you begin to reclaim your power. Not the power of dominance, not the power of control, but the raw, silent, grounded power of someone who knows who they are. You begin to see the shadow, not as an enemy, but as a guide, a protector. A wounded child that learned to survive in a brutal world. A part of you that carried the pain so that you could keep moving. And now it's tired. Now it wants to come home. The process is not clean. It's not pretty. It's not a meditation. It's rage and grief and shame pouring out after being caged for years. It's screaming in silence, crying without knowing why. It's collapsing in front of yourself, not to be saved, but to be seen. And when you see yourself, truly, the healing begins. The shadow is not here to destroy you. It's here to make you whole. Something shatters, and it's not the world. It's the image you had of yourself. The face you wore for so long begins to fall apart, and suddenly, you are naked, not in body, but in essence. The mask that once protected you now suffocates you. The identity that gave you belonging now feels like a prison. And there is no warning, no ceremony, no explanation. One day, you wake up and everything feels off. The job you fought for feels meaningless. The relationship you built feels fake. The dreams you chased feel borrowed. You no longer recognize the life you're living. And worst of all, you no longer recognize yourself. This is not a breakdown. This is a breakthrough, a rupture in the illusion, a collapse of the scaffolding you used to hold yourself together. You are not dying. You are shedding. And what dies is not you. It's the false self, the performer, the pleaser, the survivor. But the shedding is brutal. It strips you of everything that once gave you comfort. You lose certainty. You lose direction. You lose people. You begin to see how much of your life was built on fear. Fear of being alone, of being unloved, of being unworthy. And now that fear has nowhere to hide. You sit in silence and feel the panic rise. You try to hold on, to rebuild, to go back. But there is no going back. The door is closed. The past is gone. The person you were no longer exists. You are in the void. This void is not empty. It is full of everything you avoided. It holds the grief of your childhood, the shame of your failures, the rage you never expressed, the love you never allowed yourself to receive. In the void, you meet your pain. and it is vast. There are no maps for this place, no instructions, no shortcuts. You must sit in the fire, let it burn through the illusions, let it break the narratives, let it crush your defenses. You will scream, you will beg, you will feel like you're losing your mind, and in a way, you are. Because the mind that served the false self cannot guide you here. Logic becomes useless, goals become meaningless, time dissolves. You are left with nothing but raw being, and that is terrifying. But in that terror, something ancient stirs, something that was always there, buried under layers of conditioning. A voice that speaks not in words but in knowing. A presence that doesn't promise answers but offers truth. You begin to remember, not facts, not stories, but essence. You remember what it feels like to breathe without pretending, to feel without numbing, to exist without proving. This remembering is not sudden. It comes in fragments. Like a dream you're trying to recall, it slips through your fingers, then returns. The ego resists. It clings to the old self. It screams for validation, for structure, for control. It tells you that you're losing everything, that you're failing, that you're falling. And in a way, you are. You are falling out of the lie. The lie that success would save you, that love would complete you, that knowledge would make you whole. You see how you built your life around escaping yourself, around distractions and achievements, around being who you thought you should be, instead of who you are. And in that realization, you grieve, not just for what you lost, but for what you never allowed yourself to become. For the years spent in hiding, for the dreams you buried, for the parts of you that never had a voice. This grief is sacred. It softens you. It humbles you. It opens you. It prepares you for rebirth. But before rebirth, there is death. Not physical death, a symbolic one. The death of the persona, the death of certainty, the death of control. You lie on the floor, not knowing who you are, what you want, or where you're going. And for the first time, that's okay. Because you're not supposed to know. Not yet. You are being emptied. Emptied of lies, of noise, of expectation. Emptied so that something real can enter. And in that emptiness, you find a strange kind of peace. A peace not based on having, but on being. A silence that doesn't threaten, it heals. And from this silence, something begins to form. A flicker of truth. A whisper of authenticity. A sense that you are not broken. You were just buried. That underneath all the masks, all the performances, all the wounds, there is something untouched. Something pure. Something alive. This is not the end. It's the beginning. Not of a new identity, but of a new relationship with yourself. One built on truth, not roles. On presence, not performance. On freedom, not fear. You are not who you thought you were. You never were. And now, finally, you are ready to meet the one who was always waiting. Awakening is not what they told you. It's not a sudden burst of light or a euphoric revelation. It's not transcendence. It's not bliss. It doesn't come with angelic music or cosmic fireworks. Awakening is brutal. It arrives like a storm, not to elevate you, but to dismantle everything that is false within you. It doesn't give you wings. It strips away everything that was never yours. You don't awaken because you are ready. You awaken because you can no longer bear the lie that you are small, that you are broken, that you must earn your worth, the lie that love must be deserved, that success defines value, that happiness is a reward for obedience. These are not truths. They are systems. Mechanisms designed to keep you asleep, controlled, domesticated. And for most of your life, you obeyed, not because you were weak, but because you were conditioned. Taught to fear your own voice, trained to ignore your own body, shamed for feeling too much, punished for questioning. The deeper your sensitivity, the more you learn to hide. Awakening begins when hiding stops working, when the pain can no longer be numbed, when the questions you buried begin to rise like smoke. It doesn't start with clarity. It starts with confusion, disorientation, a collapse of meaning. You realize the stories you lived by no longer make sense. The goals you chased feel hollow. The life you built feels distant, like it belongs to someone else. At first you try to fix it. You set new goals. You read more books. You chase healing. But deep down, you know, this is not about fixing. This is about dying. The false self is unraveling. The one who wanted to be perfect. The one who played roles to be accepted. The one who performed for love. That self is collapsing. And with it, the entire structure of your reality begins to dissolve. You feel lost. Not because you've strayed from the path, but because the path itself has vanished. You begin to feel everything. The rage you suppressed, the grief you ignored, the fear you numbed. It all rushes to the surface. And for a while, you drown. You scream in silence. You ache in places you didn't know existed. Your body shakes. Your mind fractures. Your heart breaks. Not from love lost, but from the weight of love never received. This is the fire, the sacred fire that burns illusions, that purifies, that forces you to see. See what? See that no one is coming to save you, that the world owes you nothing, that safety is an illusion, that truth is painful, that freedom demands sacrifice, that love is not comfort, it is risk. You begin to see how much of your suffering was self-created, not because you deserved it, but because you were asleep. You betrayed yourself to be liked. You silenced your truth to be approved. You abandoned your soul to feel safe. And now that you see it, you can't unsee it. You want to run, but there's nowhere left to go. You want to numb, but the pain is too loud. You want to sleep, but the awakening has begun. And once it starts, it doesn't stop. This is not punishment. This is liberation. Not from the world, but from the illusion of who you thought you had to be. You begin to let go of the roles, of the expectations, of the labels. You stop chasing perfection. You stop seeking validation. You stop performing. And in the silence that follows, you hear something you've never heard before, your own voice. It's faint at first, shaky, unsure, but it's real. It doesn't shout, it doesn't beg, it simply speaks. And when you listen, you remember. Not facts, not stories, but a feeling, a knowing, a sense of being that was always there, buried under years of pretending. This is what it means to awaken. Not to rise above life, but to drop into it fully, to feel the rawness, to meet your fear with open arms, to sit with pain without needing to fix it, to stand in the chaos without trying to control it, to stop running from yourself and simply be here, present, naked, real. You realize your fear was never the enemy. It was your compass. It showed you where you abandoned yourself. It pointed to the parts that needed love. It was never trying to hurt you. It was trying to bring you home. You begin to honor your wounds, not as scars to be ashamed of, but as maps. Every ache, every breakdown, every betrayal, a path back to truth. You no longer see healing as a destination. You see it as a return, a remembering, a falling in love with the parts of you that were unloved. Awakening humbles you. It breaks the illusion of control. It shatters pride. It exposes the ego. And in that shattering, grace enters. Not the grace of religion or morality, but the grace of being, of breathing without needing a reason, of existing without justification. And slowly, without trying, you begin to live differently. You speak less, but mean more. You move slower, but deeper. You care less about appearance and more about essence. You stop seeking and start seeing. You stop performing and start being. You stop reacting and begin responding. From presence, not programming. The world doesn't change, but your perception does. You no longer feel the need to fit in, because you were never meant to. You no longer chase love, because you realize you are love. You no longer fear death, because you've already died, and what remains is untouchable. This is true awakening, not a destination, but a descent. Not an escape, but a return. Not a revelation, but a reckoning. You are not becoming someone else. You are unbecoming everything you are not. And in that sacred undoing, you meet yourself for the first time. There comes a moment when silence is no longer empty, when the noise of the world fades and what remains is not a void but a presence, not an absence of sound, but the presence of something ancient, still, and alive. In that silence you begin to sense it, not a voice, not a vision, but a recognition. You are not meeting something new, you are meeting what was always there. You begin to see yourself not as a collection of roles, identities, or stories, but as a being, breathing, watching, feeling, existing, not for anyone, not against anything, just being. And for the first time, you don't rush to define it. You don't rush to escape it. You simply sit with it, with yourself. This encounter is not dramatic. It's not grand. It's quiet, gentle, unshakable. There is no applause, no climax, just a subtle shift. The realization that you are no longer trying to become, you are remembering how to be. And in that being, the mind resists. It wants answers, labels, definitions. It wants to know who you are, so it can put you back in a box. But no box fits anymore. No identity feels true. No narrative feels complete. You are too alive, too fluid, too vast. You start to notice things differently. You walk slower. You breathe deeper. You listen without waiting to speak. You feel the breeze on your skin as if for the first time. The taste of food becomes sacred. The sound of birds, a song written for your return. You stop looking for signs, because everything is a sign now. Life itself is speaking, not in language, in presence. You begin to trust, not in others, not in systems, not even in beliefs, but in yourself. Not the self that talks, plans, and calculates, the deeper one, the one beneath thought, the one that has been waiting patiently while you were busy being someone else. Trusting that self feels like surrender, because it has no promises, no guarantees. It doesn't tell you what the future holds. It doesn't assure you of success. It simply asks you to follow what feels true, even when it scares you, even when it costs you everything. You start to say no, not out of rebellion, but out of clarity. You say no to roles that shrink you, to conversations that numb you, to places that drain you. You no longer tolerate what disturbs your peace, not because you are fragile, but because you finally understand your value. You say yes to, but differently. You say yes to slowness, to solitude, to stillness. You say yes to people who see you, not who use you, to paths that nourish you, not impress others, to choices that feel like truth, even if they make no sense to the world. This is not isolation. This is communion. You are not cutting ties with life. You are reconnecting with it, from the inside. No longer dependent on approval or permission. No longer enslaved by comparison. No longer chasing shadows. You are home. Not in a place, not in a person, in yourself. And yet, it is not easy. Because this self is raw, unpolished, vulnerable. It doesn't wear armor. It doesn't manipulate. It doesn't charm. It just is. And that nakedness terrifies people. They want the mask, the performance, the version of you that fits their story. And when you no longer play that part, they leave. Let them. Not out of anger, out of love. Love for yourself, for the sacredness of your path, for the integrity of your being. You're no longer interested in pretending to be less so others can feel more. You are no longer willing to betray your soul to avoid discomfort. The loneliness comes, and it cuts deep. But it is not the loneliness of emptiness. It is the loneliness of truth, of standing alone in a world built on lies, of speaking when others stay silent, of feeling when others numb. But in that loneliness, you meet strength, a strength not given by others, born from within. You stop asking, "Who am I?" Because now you live the answer. You don't speak it, you embody it, not in words, but in your breath, your presence, your choices. You are not a concept, you are not a brand, you are not a projection, you are a force, quiet, relentless, honest. And slowly, the world responds. Not immediately, not loudly, but with synchronicities, with unexpected connections, with moments that feel like alignment. Life begins to dance with you, not because you mastered it, but because you stopped resisting it. You let go, and in that letting go, you became real. You stopped fearing failure, because you understand there is no failure when you are living from the truth. Even when things fall apart, you remain whole. Even when others reject you, you stay loyal to yourself. Even when you lose everything, you never lose who you are. This is the beginning of sovereignty, of inner power, not the power to dominate, the power to stand, to walk your path without apology, to speak your truth without shame, to love without losing yourself. And from this ground, everything changes. Not because you change the world, but because you change the lens through which you see it. You no longer need to be special. You no longer need to be right. You no longer need to be anything except real. And being real is the most radical act in a world addicted to illusion. There is a silence that arrives not from absence, but from fullness. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of presence. The kind of silence that doesn't feel like loneliness. It feels like home. It comes after the storm, after the death, after the unraveling of every mask. It is not something you chase. It is something that meets you when there's nothing left to hold. It doesn't ask for your effort. It asks for your surrender. You wake up one morning and there's no longer a war inside your chest. No more rehearsing what to say. No more bracing for impact. No more twisting yourself into versions. Just breath. Just space. Just a gentle awareness that you are here. And that is enough. In this silence, nothing is missing. The hunger that used to drive you for validation, attention, success, fades. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you've stopped needing. You no longer seek to fill a void. The void has transformed. It is no longer emptiness. It is capacity. You begin to feel how noisy the world is, how frantic, how desperate, and you realize how long you were caught in its rhythm, always reaching, always grasping, always proving. But now, that rhythm no longer seduces you. You move to a different beat, one that arises from within. You notice how often people speak without listening, act without feeling, move without arriving, and you no longer resent them. You feel for them, because you were once there too, caught in the illusion that more is the answer, that faster is better, that louder means truer. But now, you understand, the truth doesn't scream, it whispers. The soul doesn't rush, it waits. The real doesn't demand attention, it simply is. You no longer try to explain yourself. You no longer argue to be understood. You no longer contort your truth to be palatable. You are not here to be liked. You are here to be real. And that realness costs you. It costs you illusions, but it gives you back your life. The silence becomes your teacher. In it, you see the patterns that ruled you, the fears that shaped you, the lies you called identity. You see how often you confused intensity for love, achievement for worth, attention for connection, and you forgive yourself. Not because you were wrong, but because you were asleep. And now, you're awake. Awake to the quiet joy of a single moment, of wind against your face, of sunlight on your hands, of drinking tea slowly, of listening to your breath. Awake to the sacredness of now. You no longer want to escape it. You no longer fantasize about elsewhere. You are not waiting for something to begin. You are in it. Life is not over there. Life is here. Not tomorrow. Not after you fix yourself. Not once you achieve your goals. Now. In that now, you begin to see that simplicity is the highest form of beauty. Not minimalism as aesthetics, but minimalism as essence. You need less because you are more. You don't crave what you don't lack. You don't chase what you've already found. You don't fight when there is nothing to defend. You become unshakable, not because nothing can touch you, but because everything can, and you remain. Emotions come and go, but you stay. Chaos swirls around you, but your center holds. People misunderstand you, but you don't abandon yourself. You found your ground, and it's silence. This silence is not passive. It is not dull. It is not apathy. It is aliveness without noise, depth without drama, awareness without commentary. It is not the absence of thoughts, but the freedom from their control. You no longer need to be seen. You see yourself. You no longer beg for love. You are love. You no longer strive for peace. You are peace. And from this place, life begins to flow, not as a project to fix, not as a problem to solve, but as a dance. You don't choreograph it. You don't analyze every step. You let yourself be moved. You trust the music, even when it changes. You trust yourself. Not because you know the future, but because you've met the part of you that doesn't need to know. The part that is timeless, anchored, eternal. The part that watches you fall apart and holds you through it all. In this silence, there are no ambitions, only movements. No expectations, only intentions. No promises, only presence. And presence is enough. You no longer fear stillness. You crave it. You no longer see solitude as lack. You see it as fullness. You no longer seek freedom outside. You feel it inside, in your ability to be with what is, without needing it to change. You start to understand what power really is. It's not control. It's not dominance. It's not influence. It's presence. To be here, fully, undistracted, undivided, unapologetic. And you don't announce it. You don't declare it. You don't brand it. You just are. And people feel it. They may not understand it, but they feel it. Something about you calms them, or disturbs them, or awakens them, not because you tried, but because you stopped trying. That's what silence does. It strips away the noise until only truth remains. And in that truth, you come home. To be alive does not mean to breathe. To be alive means to feel, to be aware, to walk through this world not as a machine fulfilling functions, but as a being in constant dialogue with the invisible. Alive, not because your heart beats, but because your soul moves. There is a difference between existence and presence. Many exist. Few are present. Presence is not what you do. It's how you do it. It's the way you enter a room, the way you listen, the way you touch, speak, stand. It's the energy that fills a space long after you've left. To be present is to be real. Not partially, not selectively, fully. And to be real is the most radical act in a world obsessed with illusion. You are no longer the story you tell. You are no longer the image you project. You are no longer the echo of others' expectations. You are here, not to perform, but to be. And being is the hardest thing in the world, because it requires everything. It requires you to leave behind the safety of labels, to step away from the comfort of belonging, to disappoint others in order to honor yourself. It requires the courage to say, "This is who I am," even when your voice shakes, even when no one claps, even when it costs you everything. But in that loss, you find something no one can give you, yourself. And once you find it, you never trade it again. No applause, no paycheck, no affection is worth the price of self-abandonment. You stop negotiating your truth for temporary comfort. You stop twisting yourself into shapes to fit broken molds. You stop apologizing for your depth, your quiet, your fire. You begin to live not by default, but by design. Not someone else's design, your own. And your design is not perfect. It is not clean. It is not consistent. But it is yours. It grows from your scars. It moves with your rhythms. It breathes your breath. You live with presence. You speak from the center. You walk with awareness. You see clearly, not with the eyes, but with the being. And what you see is not always beautiful, but it is always true. You see how people run, not physically, spiritually, emotionally. They run from silence, from stillness, from themselves. You see how pain terrifies them, how honesty confronts them, how love confuses them. And you no longer take it personally. You simply hold your ground, softly, quietly, unshakably. You don't try to change them. You embody change. You don't preach awakening. You live it. You don't sell freedom. You become it. And slowly, life shifts. Not because you forced it, but because the frequency you carry no longer allows what doesn't resonate. You start attracting people who feel like truth, spaces that feel like sanctuary, work that feels like alignment. Not because you seek them, but because you are them. You realize that your life is your message, not your words. Your life, the way you live, the way you choose, the way you breathe when no one watches. And in that realization, you find peace. Not peace as a state, peace as a presence, a peace that doesn't depend on conditions, that survives loss, that transcends chaos, that sits quietly in the middle of pain and says, "I am still here." You don't arrive at this peace by achieving. You arrive by surrendering, by allowing, by stopping the war within, the war against feeling, against being, against truth. And when the war ends, everything softens. Your shoulders drop, your breath deepens, your heart opens. You stop bracing for impact. You stop preparing to be hurt. You stop expecting disappointment. You meet the world not with defense, but with presence. You begin to trust yourself fully, not because you're always right, but because you're always real. You no longer need to know what will happen. You no longer need to control outcomes. You trust that whatever comes, you will meet it as yourself. And that trust is freedom. Freedom not from responsibility, but from pretending. Freedom not from discomfort, but from avoidance. Freedom not from others, but from the illusion that you are not enough. You begin to love differently, not with attachment, not with need, not with scripts, but with presence. You love as an offering, as a reflection, as a state of being. You no longer use love to fill a hole. You love from wholeness, and in doing so, you set others free too. You stop chasing purpose. You realize being fully yourself is the purpose. Not a task, not a goal, a state, a presence, an embodiment. You stop fearing death because you've already died to the lie, to the role, to the mask. And what remains cannot die. What remains is you, pure, true, untouchable. You become the witness, not detached, but anchored, not above life, but deep within it. You cry, you laugh, you ache, you burn, but through it all, you remain aware, alive, here. That is what it means to live, to walk through life awake, to walk through pain without armor, to walk through joy without clinging, to walk through the unknown without fear, to walk through yourself and find home. Not a destination, not an arrival, but a presence, a truth, a return. You are no longer searching. You are no longer waiting. You are no longer becoming. You are, and that is everything. We're sure you've discovered plenty of value, so subscribe now and stay connected.